So Jen Sincero's book is called You Are a Badass: How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life. But we are going to rename this You Are a Badass at Getting Married. How to stop being stressed out and overwhelmed and start planning a beautiful wedding and an extraordinary marriage. If you can transform your life and your marriage throughout this wedding planning process, you're going to go on to do such big things. Hey Bridal Beauties, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kyle James and I am so excited for today's video. I have been obsessed with You Are a Badass for years now. I've literally read it probably like 20 different times. As a wedding planner, I always recommend that my brides read this book and have their relationship, their new marriage at the forefront of their minds, as well as their wedding. Since I am always recommending this book to my brides and my friends and everyone pretty much, I thought, why don't I make a video on how to apply this specifically to the wedding planning process in your marriage. If you don't already have this book, you should order it immediately. I will for sure link it below. Whether you do the hard copy book or listen to it on Audible, either way works. Just make sure that you get yourself a copy of this. If you already have this book, then it's time to break it out, dust it off. It would be super helpful if you read each chapter before you watch the corresponding video, so that you know what I'm talking about. In this video, I'm going to cover the introduction because she has tons of lessons in there that were definitely helpful to us, as well as chapter 1. So let's get started. In the introduction, Jen talks about how her life was pretty good. She had some notable accomplishments. It was okay, but just not awesome. I think a lot of us can relate to this from a wedding planning perspective. I don't hear that many girls come up to me and be like, oh my God, I'm totally crushing this wedding planning thing. It's so amazing, it's so easy and so awesome. That's just not really what we hear. So right now you're probably on cloud 9 in the relationship department. Getting engaged tends to do that to us. But I think the not awesome time tends to come after the newlywed phase. It does not have to, it totally doesn't have to, and it's not going to for you because you're watching this and you're doing this along with me. It's just been so conditioned into our brains that the newlywed phase wears off. It's so dumb. Anyway, her point is she knew deep down that everything wasn't this incredible, awesome amazingness that she knew she could have and that she deserved. She says, this is about getting mighty clear about what makes you happy and what makes you feel the most alive, and then creating it instead of pretending you can't have it or that you don't deserve it. It's about having the cojones to show up as the brightest, happiest, badassiest version of yourself, whatever that looks like to you. Now imagine showing up to your wedding planning and your marriage mighty clear about what makes you happy and what makes you feel the most alive, and as the brightest, happiest, badassiest version of yourself. What kind of wedding are you going to have? More importantly, what kind of marriage are you going to have? Holy cow! This gives me chills just thinking about it. It's so good. If we show up to plan our weddings like this, we're going to create extraordinary experiences that will make memories that will last a lifetime. Wedding planning is overwhelming and dramatic when it's only about the dress and the catering and finishing your checklist and all that that doesn't even make us happy. But when it's about what makes you feel alive, now we have something to work for. Something that's like so juicy and exciting that there isn't room for stress and drama. So how do we do this? Jen says you can do it with one simple shift. You go from wanting it to deciding to have it. I'm not going to read the full quote because some of the stuff in here might get my YouTube channel marked as explicit. We don't want that. But she says, deciding means jumping in all the way, doing whatever it takes and going after your dreams with the tenacity of a dateless cheerleader a week before prom night. Okay, so decide. In your wedding planning process and in your marriage, will you go after what makes you happy and what makes you feel the most alive as the happiest, brightest, badassiest version of yourself? Okay, cool, me too. Let's do this. So if we're really gonna do this, we have to be open-minded. You have to be willing to put aside some of your old beliefs and stories so that you can try on some new ideas. If you don't like the new stuff, that's totally fine. You can just go back to doing things the way you were doing them. It's not that big of a deal. She says, if you want to live a life you have never lived, you have to do things you have never done. If you can transform your life and your marriage throughout this wedding planning process, you're going to go on to do such big things. At minimum, you'll inspire the heck out of the next girl planning her wedding. Inspired, happy people create magic in the world, like marriages that really last. All right, so that's the introduction. I know, juicy, huh? So good. Let's move on to chapter 1. My subconscious made me do it. This chapter starts off with a hilarious story about Jen mattress shopping and her confrontation management skills, or her lack thereof. And that's just how she was raised, but yet it still haunts her in her daily life. Who can relate to this? I know I can. Those confrontation management skills would probably be really great to have in this wedding planning process. I think it would remove a lot of stress and drama for a lot of people, because that's just part of this process. Sometimes in this process, you're going to have to tell people no, or you're going to have to stand up for what you want, and it's not always that comfortable, but it's always worth it. Same with marriage. Marriage is full of confrontations every single day, positive and negative. And if you do it wrong, then you'll both be miserable. But if you change your beliefs and how you deal with them, your relationship is going to be amazing. I know this because I've done it. Well, it's not like a past tense finished thing. We're constantly working on it and constantly working through new things. But that's how you build a stronger marriage, by getting through these confrontations and working through them together. So basically, we're programmed with this slew of awesome beliefs that we don't even know that we have, but that massively impact our lives and our relationships on a daily basis. You might just say, well, I was just born this way. Wrong. Nope. You were born this sweet little bundle of perfection that was a perfectly blank slate, and you learned to be who you are and to have the beliefs that you have, most of which have nothing to do with who you actually are or with reality or truth. The main source of this information was, of course, your parents, assisted by society at large. When they were raising you, your parents, in a genuine effort to protect you and educate you and love you with all of their hearts, hopefully, passed on the beliefs that they learned from their parents, who learned them from their parents, who learned them from their parents. Most people are living an illusion based on someone else's beliefs. And the craziest part is that it's totally subconscious. We don't know that we're doing it and that we have a choice not to. She says, I can pretty much guarantee that every time you tearfully ask yourself the question, WTF is my problem, the answer lies in some lame, limiting, and false subconscious belief that you've been dragging around without even realizing it. So you might be thinking at this point, great, so my life is run by my subconscious beliefs, but what am I supposed to do about it? She says the first key to ridding yourself of these subconscious beliefs is to become aware that you have them. She goes into an exercise in the book where she has you write down some areas of your life that you would describe as less than impressive, and then has you write down the first words or phrases that come to mind when you think of them. And she lists a bunch of different examples, but we're going to do this exercise with planning your wedding and with marriage. So grab a pen and paper or just make a note on your phone. You definitely need to write this down, because that's how you kind of get your subconscious thoughts out of you. A lot of times you'll have a thought and you'll notice something, and then like your brain will make you forget it, like, no, protect ourselves. So be sure that you're writing this stuff down so that you have it out in front of you so you can really take it in and see what beliefs are coming up. So write down what comes to mind when you think of the word wedding, or your wedding specifically. For me, what came up was, I can't afford what I actually want. It's stressful and overwhelming. I'm not an organized person. I'm terrible with money. It's my one chance to be special because I'm not special in my everyday life. And it has to be perfect and super expensive or else I'll be judged. What an awesome list. That's gonna be a great time planning that wedding, huh? I'm interested to see what comes up for you girls in this exercise, so I would love it if you would share your answers in the comments below. And it doesn't have to be all negative either. Sometimes you'll have positive beliefs as well, but just be sure you write down anything that comes up. It's just important to know what's controlling you in this process so that you can be conscious about it. Next, we're going to do the same thing with marriage. What comes to mind when you think of marriage? If you're having trouble having stuff come up for you, something that I noticed that I do that kind of lays out my limiting beliefs right in front of me is look at the jokes that I make about something. Because in every joke, it's a little bit true, but if you're constantly making jokes about marriage being awful or hard or whatever, then that's definitely something you should write down. So what I wrote down is, I have to be perfect and amazing. I have to be a driven, successful career woman, manage the perfect, beautiful house, and raise perfect little babies. I have to win the fight or he's just going to walk all over you. He has to support the family. It's hard. It's amazing in the honeymoon phase, but it just gets harder and worse from there, and you're just stuck in it. Whoa, being that person in a relationship is really gonna make for a blissful marriage, right? Please share your answers below. I really want to hear what you're coming up with. It's really funny because I've done this exercise. Like I said, I read this book like a million times, but I've done this exercise with a lot of different areas in my life, and there's a lot of reoccurring themes that come up for me in every single thing. So if I'm like going through something challenging, I write this out and I'm like, oh yeah, it's that thing again. No wonder marriage is so difficult and usually ends in divorce. Look at the foundation that we're building these relationships on. All these crazy beliefs and stories that are definitely not true, that were just passed on to us from generations and generations before. When you start thinking about this stuff, you'll notice little things popping up in your everyday life and you're like, why do I do it this way? Is it just because this is how I was supposed to do it? This is how I was taught to do it? Or is this actually a good way to do something? It's really funny. It's kind of crazy, actually. It's just so powerful to start examining your subconscious beliefs and your stories and your rules that you have about life. And this is just the first chapter. So good, right? If you don't have this book already, get it. And if you do, be sure that you're reading it along with me. Like I said, I'm going to do a different video on each chapter, a new episode, so that you can be a badass at getting married. So be sure that you're subscribed so that you don't miss any of my upcoming ones. And I also post tons of wedding planning content and inspiration as well. All right, I love you girls so much. Have an amazing week. I hope this was helpful. Please give it a thumbs up if it was. And be sure you share this with your bride friends. And we'll see you next time. Happy planning.